Okay, hi, Paul Slack. It's Good News Planet speaking to James Gilbert. Hey, James, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent. Distinguished historian. That's you, James. Reveals truths about a forgotten America in a new critically acclaimed novel. And it has an interesting name. It's called the Tales of Little Egypt. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
So I was saying that we have a new intern, and it's ironic, but our intern just joined us a couple of days ago, and ironically, when I get new interns from internationally, I like to create a channel. He happens to be from Egypt.
Ah, well, Little Egypt is very different.
However, I looked up Egypt, Little Egypt. I looked up Egypt here in it's actually Texas, I think, a renowned place. And that Little Egypt in that times was a historic town for slavery. And I found it quite interesting. Maybe you know more about that. And tell us about the novel because it's very interesting. You have some very wonderful stories in there about the older days that probably didn't change much from today.
Well, I think that's probably true. It's Little Egypt is that area between the Ohio and the Mississippi River in southern Illinois, and a very special kind of place. It's an area of small towns and a few old coal mines and lots of railroads that crisscross the area. And so it was a stopping off place for people who were going north or south or east or west. Some of them decided to stay. And I was particularly interested in it because it seemed to me that it was really a perfect example of small town America, the kind of America that we like to think of as being the real America, and the people that I created who live there are people who survived all kinds of difficulties. Who loved and hated and fought and schemed and had joyful lives. But I thought it was a great way to tell the story about early America.
Okay, all right. Are you a small town guy?
Well, I grew up in a very small town, yes, indeed, and both of my parents came from Southern Illinois, so I know the area quite well. Particularly the center part of Little Egypt.
In your small town, how many people graduated in your high school?
How many people? Well, I went to a very big high school.
Oh.
I went to a tiny grade school, but because it was such a small town, we didn't have a high school.
Okay.
So I had to go to the town next door, which had a great big, huge high school, 4,000 kids. And I must admit, I was pretty lost for a while. I wasn't used to that kind of life, but it turned out to be a great place to be. It was kind of a melting pot, and in an old industrial town south of Chicago.
Give us an example of a good story here. I love good stories, and you're a good storyteller. You got a lot of reviews from some renowned book, editors, book, smart people. Let me put it like that. And give me a good story. I like stories.
Well, I'll tell you a story from the novel.
Yes, of course.
The novel is really 11 or 12 stories about individuals, and they all eventually interact and meet each other. So it becomes a kind of a novel, but each chapter focuses on a particular person. One of the stories that I think is a lot of fun is about a young boy who grows up in a just an ordinary family, but is a boy who loves animals. And one of the things that was characteristic of the little towns of Southern Illinois was that the circus came through every year and spent 3 or 4 days setting up the circus and performing, and then taking it down, and then going off on the railroad to the next little town. And this boy who loved animals acted as a kind of junior roustabout. He helped out with the putting up of the tent and feeding the animals, but he became very upset because it was the middle of the summer. July in Southern Illinois is like Mississippi in July. And all the animals were in these metal cages out in the sun, sweating away, and he was very worried about them, and so he he decided to secretly go with the circus, and so he hid out in a boxcar when the circus was leaving, and went on to the next town. And the same thing happened. The circus set up, the animals were in these terrible cages. And so he decided to steal one of the animals and take it back home because he thought it was a monkey. And the monkey he thought was dying. And so he takes him back home and hides him in the barn of his parents' house. And there is an animal cage in the barn, an old animal cage. And the next day, after he arrives home, he puts the monkey in the barn, and the sheriff comes, and he says, "Frank, where's the monkey?" And he goes out, and Frank says, "Well, I took the monkey, and he's in the barn." And so they all go out, mother, father, sheriff, and Frank go out to the barn. And what do they see but the monkey sitting inside the cage, really happy to be back where he belongs? And so it's a story about animals and their relationship to captivity and this little boy's adventure.
I love it. That's good news. That's a good news story. That's our mission, is to promote that, and I'm totally a believer that monkey is my brother. So
Right.
I go with that. I'm going with that. Sure looks like me. In any case, give me another story. That was wonderful. I loved hearing that.
You want another story?
I'm into stories. I love stories.
Okay.
They're
All right.
beautiful.
Well, this is a very different kind of story.
Give me
This
one
is
question.
about.
You conceived these stories. This
I'm
is
sorry?
This is not a story that somebody told you. This is a story.
No, these
that
are
came
stories. These
out
are
of
stories that
God.
I just invented.
Mr. Gilbert's brain.
I think they all come from here.
Okay.
The other story is about a very different kind of story. It's about a middle-aged woman who was always wanted to get married, but never found anybody who would marry her in this little town. And she lives with her parents, her father, a nasty old man, and her mother, who's not a kind woman either. And it's a very tense relationship. The father always told everybody that he had a lot of money. And in the story, he is dying, and when he dies, suddenly the middle-aged woman becomes very popular because all the eligible bachelors in town think that she's going to inherit a fortune. And so she lets it be known that she's available. And one of the gentlemen in town begins a courtship and is very serious about marrying her. But one day during this courtship, she's sitting in the kitchen with her mother, and her mother says, you know, your father never had a penny. He doesn't have any money at all. And we are going to be very poor. And so your suitor is going to be very disappointed. And you probably ought to tell him. And the middle-aged woman says, well, I don't think I will tell him. And she eventually marries this man, and of course he is horribly disappointed, but she finally finds a husband. The story is called The Heiress.
Okay, all right, and the ending of it is they live happily ever after. What goes on in your brain, or they get divorced?
We don't know how they'll live.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, I'm a visual guy, James, and my mother was a librarian, but I was a boob tuber. So I made lots and lots of TV shows in my life, and movie or so. And so as you're speaking, I see the scenario. That's what goes on my brain. That's how I see it. So far, I see two nice stories that could be in a nice movie. Give me another. Do you mind giving me one more? I don't want to ruin. I'm not going to ruin nothing. If people get excited about this, they're going to be excited about the way you are and what you're sharing.
So let me tell you the beginning story. Yeah. The very first story.
Good.
It is it takes place at the very end of the Civil War. Because, well, actually, no, I think I'm going to stop. Let me tell you a different story because it's much more up to date. When I wrote this book, we had not yet had the pandemic. Okay. So but some of my relatives, distant relatives who lived in in Little Egypt, died of the great influenza plague of 1918.
Okay.
And these were family stories about these people, and I knew something about them. So the very last story in the book is about a young woman who falls in love with an Italian immigrant. There were a lot of immigrants in this area who worked in the coal mines. And she fell in love with him, and it was 1916. And he gets drafted and goes off to fight in France. And during the battle, I have a couple of scenes of the battle. He suffers from a gas attack. You know, the Germans used poison gas against the American and French and British infantry. And so he's gassed and it weakens his lungs. And he comes back and he's very, he's weak, but he and this young girl decide to get married. And she wants to give him a present. She wants to give him a present. And so, so she goes off to St. Louis, which is just across the river. And it's the big city in the area. And she buys a beautiful Tiffany bowl, which she brings back, and she's going to give it to him when they get married. But then he begins to become more and more ill. And it's clear that he has the Spanish flu. And he has a terrible burning fever. And so nobody knows how to deal with that in the early 20th century. There are no antibiotics. There's no antiviral medicines. There's certainly no vaccine against it. And so the only thing they can think to do is to put him outside on a sleeping porch. And it's November, late November. when they do this. And she goes out the next morning and touches his forehead and feels, yes, he's cool, but unnaturally cool, and he's died during the night. And she takes the wedding present, the bowl, and she puts it in the dining room of her house, and fills it every day with fresh flowers and fresh fruit as a memory to him. And that's the story. So these are all stories about how people cope with life and how they survive, and how they get on.
Well, lucky me, because I'm hearing, beautiful thoughts about our humanness, about our love for others. It's so wonderful. I've been doing this 23 years, the good news, and I guess I've been doing it 50 years for promoting positive content. I go way back to All in the Family, and like shows that we learn from about life and so on and so forth. I always thought that was wonderful, utilizing media. Your medium is a book. My medium has been television and shows, and I'm always happy, whether it's a book or any medium that's positive, that's life affirming. I mean, this is our mission, is to promote life affirmation, because in our reality, and we are what we think the world is the world is good. The world is peaceful. We do have some people that are not so nice and some people that are unpeaceful, but we're focusing on the positive, minimizing what they call the negative, I guess you could say. And from what I'm hearing from you, you are accentuating the positiveness. I mean, you got a flu, a man dies, but the woman sits there with some flowers and shares her love for this person for the rest of her life. I mean, it's a very touching. The three shows, sure, I'll call them shows. The three stories that you included here are really beautiful. So as each one, so in essence, if I see this correctly, you have a book that I could just, and I'm this kind of guy, since I'm not a reader. My mother was a librarian. That was a little stupid kid and rebelled. I have 2,000 authors I've interviewed. And so is your book a book that I can go like chapter 6 and start off with, or does it follow a flow?
You could do either one, because the book moves from the Civil War to 1918, and so each story occurs a little bit later. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't read an individual story, because they're all self-contained.
That's a beautiful book. You've done a good job, my friend, because I think that is it's tough to get through 200-300 pages. I don't know. I have no idea how anybody does it. I'm out. I'm sleeping. I can't. It's a lot to take in. Some people can do that. My brain somehow, I can't do that. So, but to hear you either speak about it or to see a book that is in the manner that you've created. So what will you, let me ask you a couple last questions. What do you see as the benefit from somebody reading your book?
Well, I think reading the book gives you a sense of how people endure, of how they face difficulties, and really these are small stories that really have a big meaning to them, I think. And I think that's that was my joy in writing it. I have to say that writing this book was a wonderful experience for me, because I loved the characters, and I loved catching a moment of their lives as a kind of illustration of what this period in America was like, and in a kind of strange way, what even the present is like. Even though this is a book set in the past, I think you would recognize all of these characters.
Do you, another question is, when did you start writing this book?
When?
Yes.
About 2.5 years ago.
Uh,
And I finished it. I finished it about 6 months before the pandemic hit. You know, it takes a long time for a book to be produced,
gosh.
and so you know, there was at least a year that passed while it was in production. There are all kinds of details that I will not tell you about, but you know, just proofreading and all that kind of thing. Covers.
Of course. All right, but you endured.
Yes, I enjoyed.
All right. Well, you are what the book represents, and that's important. Let me ask you one last question, or two last questions. So, where do people get the book? And you have a website also. What's on your website? What's your
Yes,
website?
I do. I do have a website. It's one word: JamesGilbertAuthor.com.
And what's on there?
That's my website, and all of the books I've written are on there. I was formerly a historian, and so there's a lot of history, a mention of history books there, and the other novels I've written. And you can get it on any kind of platform that sells books: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. All kinds of people carry mail order books, or if you can find a bookstore that's open, I'm not sure whether there are very many yet that are open. You could certainly order it through through your local bookstore.
All right. Well, that's good news. And the good news here on the Upper West Side is we have 3 or 4 or 5 bookstores here, and which is wonderful for our community, Upper West Side of Manhattan, and well-known ones: Strand, Shakespeare, Barnes and Noble, and some smaller guys and other guys. And books are important to this area community, and it's a big honor for that to be here. So, last question: we're involved. I think I'm going to ask you with peace. The word peace, because your writing is very, in my mind, showing peace and love. And so I ask people, because we're involved with some concerts and things with regard to the International Day of Peace and so on. So I ask people, what is peace for them? How about you, James? What does peace mean for you?
What peace means to me?
Yeah, what is peace? Yeah, peace to you.
I think it means happiness that with the way you've lived in the world, and a feeling that your relationships with other people have been positive and fruitful, and that you've made some kind of a contribution. Yes, that's my idea.
All right, this is James Gilbert. Good job. Good job. I'm happy we got this moment to talk together. The name of the book again is?
Tales of Little Egypt.
Beautiful. Congratulations to you. I hope it sell 1 trillion copies, because this is the kind of goodness that people should be involved in, more than some of the silly bang bang shoot 'em ups. Thank you, my friend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.